What's up, YouTube? It's Ray with Nimrod Collective here in my garage today because if you've been watching the channel for a little bit through all of the name changes and all of the things that went on with that, anyway, if you've been watching the channel for a little bit and you've seen my do-it-yourself, do-it-at-home moly resin coating video, you will know that I did it all with this little toaster oven, which worked fine for a lot of the small suppressor coating jobs that I was doing. Coated almost all the suppressors that I have, and especially all the ones that I built in here. But starting to hit the limit of some longer setups not being able to fit in there. And I also wanted to be able to do barreled actions, AR uppers, things like that. And so this thing's just not cutting it anymore. So it's time to move on to something a little bit bigger, which is this locker. Turned it into an oven. I was gonna film a little more of the process, but I was dealing with a broken camera. Got that replaced, and so now we're like 70% of the way through. So I'm gonna do a quick rundown of it before we finish it all up. It's basically just a locker from Amazon. It's like $100. It's just a really thin sheet metal locker. Not too bad. Covered it with Thermotech insulation inside, which seems to work pretty good so far. Just to do a quick build breakdown, this thing comes flat packed in a box, big rectangular box, meaning you have to put it all together, which I thought was going to be more of a pain than it ended up being. All of these side panels on it are separate, and basically the two sides bolt to the legs at the bottom, and then you bolt the back in, bolt the top and bottom on, and the door, which is kind of a pain to put together, but it's actually really nice for laying the insulation down. If you look in the back here, it's hard to see with all of the insulation there, but there's a bit of a ridge there because of the way these go together, and it's kind of like the door here, where you see there's a little bit of a lip there. And so the insulation, like this top part, lays in there really nice, and then you just tape around the edges, and it provides you that surface to tape onto. So at the end of the day, it actually works out really well. I've just got a little electric smoker heating element replacement in there with its plug-in on the outside here. And I had bought a PID controller for this thing, but it's for home brewing, and turns out the temperature doesn't go high enough. I don't know if there's a brand on this thing. There is. So it's this Bridea heating PID controller. FYI, it's marketed as going up to 302 degrees, but when I got it all plugged in, attached to the smoker or the oven here, tried to run the temperature up, and it caps at 257 degrees, which is not enough for Cerakote. It's not enough for moly resin. It just isn't high enough for what I was going to be using this oven for. Reached out to the manufacturer. Turns out 257 is the max temperature. 302 is the highest that the alarm goes, but that's not the actual operating range. So, long story short, that PID controller is not going to work. I'm going to have to build my own, which is where all of this stuff comes in. Got an Inkbird PID, a bunch of other associated stuff. Just waiting on a couple of parts now. Electrical box to put it all in that I can mount to the side of the oven. And as soon as I get that in, I'll cover a little bit of that and we'll go from there. But for now, I just want to go over this. I ran out of the tape yesterday when I was putting this all together, and it was just kind of getting a little bit long of a day. This thing took like 6 hours to put together the way you see it now, and get it all insulated nice and get everything cut, which is the other thing that I wanted to mention. Getting a hole cut in the side of this thing, I did it all after the insulation was in, which was pretty dumb because that stuff is not the easiest to get through. If you were gonna add any hooks to the side like I have on this, you see the outside, all the bolts that you see exposed on the outside. They go with all these hooks that I have inside. You can kind of see them all in there. There's 4 on each side and 3 in the top. When you drill through the outside and try to go through the insulation on the inside, it just catches and it rips off all of your hard work. You can kind of see it in the corners a little bit. It just ripped all that out when I was in the middle of doing it, which was a huge pain. So if you're going to take this on for yourself in the future to build yourself a Cerakote oven, I would pre-drill all of that stuff, because it's a lot easier to just go in with a screwdriver or something and move that rock wool that's basically on the back of the insulation out of the way, and then you poke through it, and it's just easier that way than trying to drill it. But anyway, what I wanted to do today, since I got another order of the insulation tape in, is I'm going to finish insulating this door. And I'll kind of show you the process of what that looks like, because it's basically just on a smaller scale of what the sides looked like, getting them insulated. So I'm going to go over that. And then also, I'm kind of glad I stopped halfway through, because I'm going to get a temperature difference. I did one heat run up with this thing, and the sides stayed pretty cool. So I'm curious what the uninsulated door temperature is going to be compared to the sides. So I'm going to get this thing heated up, put the temp gun on it, and we'll see what the difference is. And then after that, I'll get to getting that door insulation finished. So this thing's only been on for like 5 minutes. It's just on with the little electric smoker controller right now. PID is going to be way more accurate, but at least with this, before I build the PID, I can test it. So let's see. Yeah, so that door is already, 140 degrees in some spots, and that's all in the non-insulated area. You can even see as we get towards the center of the door, it drops where that little divider was. So just that air gap provides some insulation, but let's see what the side of this thing is. Significantly cooler. 68 degrees, which is just over ambient temp in my garage currently, compared to the door, which is up to almost 170 degrees in some spots now, especially down by the heating element, 200 degrees. So you can tell that insulation makes a huge difference. All right, just because I'm curious, let's see what this handle's at. So not quite as hot, but 140 degrees on the handle, because it's on a panel that's not been insulated yet. Up here, even, we're up to almost 200 degrees, and then down by the heating element, we're at 250 degrees. So let's check again. 80 degrees on the side, which really still feels cool to the touch. Let's get this open without burning myself. And you can see we're up to almost 200 degrees inside. See the heating element doing its thing. But yeah, this thing gets toasty. The door doesn't like to fit right when it's at operating temperature sometimes. But just kind of wanted to point out the fact that insulation makes a huge difference, and that Thermotech insulation works really well. Just look at that. There are some spots where it's like almost 150 degrees of difference. So I'm gonna get that thing turned off, let it cool back down, and then I'll run through adding the insulation to that lower section of the door. All right, so here's the door off. This thing's surprisingly easy to pop off. It's got like one spring pin at the top there, you can kind of see it. And those are the 2 voids that I was talking about. Basically, when you're insulating this thing, you just want to cover up all of the exposed vents and like peg hole spots. You can kind of see it there. I've got some tape on the outside. Also, there's tape on the inside where these like peg slots are in the side. You want to cover all that up before you put the insulation down. So the top of this had a bunch of vents. I just put tape over them and then laid the insulation and then taped around the insulation. So that tape you see here is the same thing. It's just voids being covered up and then the area around the handle. Kind of want to get that all, at least I did. I don't know if it's necessary, but I wanted all those vents taped up before the insulation went over it, just in case. So this is the tape that I'm using. It's just like a aluminum fiberglass heat resistant tape type thing. I think if you search heat tape on Amazon, you'll find a lot of the same type of product. This is like 10 bucks for a roll. I thought I was going to be able to get away with one roll, but I ran out yesterday doing the tape on everything else, and so I had to order another one. So you'll probably want 2 rolls of this. You should be able to get away with 1 roll of the Thermotech if you get a locker that's the same size as this. And I'll try and get everything linked in the description in case you want to build your own. It's really not all that bad. Hardest part's going to be the PID controller, but I'll get into that as soon as I have all the parts to do it, and I'll throw that up included at the end of this video as well. But for now, I'll just go through adding this insulation to the door, and I'm going to do each of these voids. If I have enough, ideally I'd like to do another layer of it on this door to keep it a little bit more insulated, at least around where that handle's at. I'm going to do a second layer of it. But let's get the one done for now, and we'll go from there. I'll kind of show you what that looks like. I'll show you the Thermotech. It's basically just got this rock wool type fiberglass on the inside and then the heat barrier on the outside. Works pretty well though. I'm just going to lay this out kind of into that void, and I usually take a razor knife and I'll score where it needs to be cut, then I'll come back with scissors and do the actual cut. It's a little bit easier with scissors. This stuff is really resilient and avoids being cut by razor knives or any other knives that I've tried pretty well. The only thing that I've had a lot of luck with is kitchen shears. So yep, I'll score it with the razor knife. I'll go back with the kitchen shears and kind of cut through it where it needs to be cut. Also, because of this lock assembly sticks out, I'm actually not going to go the full length of it. Actually, I should be able to get away with the full length of it. I'll just do a notch to kind of go around that area as soon as I have it cut out. I think that'll work. Just kind of get it pressed down in there pretty good, and then use the razor to mark where you're going to want to cut. And make sure as you go along you're pushing it into this lip so that you don't cut it too narrow to be able to get good coverage in there. And then as you get to the bottom, just cut across. Like I said, the razor doesn't like to cut through it, so go back with the shears. And there goes the tape. These shears work so much better. Just kind of go along your cut line. Should probably wear gloves when you're doing this too. I don't really feel anything in my fingers like you would with a fiberglass insulation, but it's probably better safe than sorry. I should have remembered to put some on today. Anyway, there we have it. Get this out of the way. I'll get just that side kind of taped up. There we go. It's framed up a little bit better. Now I'll just kind of go through and notch out a spot for that lock assembly. gotta get it tucked in there. Take out a little bit more. Yeah. Just slightly more. I also keep all these little cutoffs. You never know if there's a little void or a gap or something that you want to put some insulation in. It helped in some of the corners at the bottom of the locker when I was doing them the other day. You can even, take some of this and add it back to the side so that there's less of a void there. I think I'm going to end up doing that actually. I'll tuck it up under there. Just need to cut a little bit of this off, but it works good for stuff like that. See, it kind of fills up that void. And with these exposed gaps, since I added that, I'm gonna throw a little bit of tape on there as well before I get started taping around the perimeter of everything else. If you're going to wear gloves for anything on this project, I would wear it for this tape. 'Cause I'm fairly certain the tape has fiberglass in it somewhere, because I can feel that a little bit. Let's just get that gap taped up. And then I like to do the long sides first before these short sides, just because that kind of holds it in place really well. You can kind of just take this, lay it out where you want it, mark where you need to cut, chop it off. Just regular scissors work for that tape pretty well too. And then what I like to do is get the edge of this pulled up, kind of get this started with the amount of overlap that you want. I like to have more on the insulation than the other side, but you still want a good, bond. Pull this off. And then you can kind of lay it out. Make sure you have the same consistent gap all the way down. I push it down against the solid edge of the locker and then kind of push down towards the side against this edge to get it started like that. And then I come back and I push it down on the insulation. You can even take like the edge of your scissors, push it up against the side in the seam like that. And then let me show you what that looks like. You can see it gives you kind of a nice crisp edge and a lot of overlap on that insulation. It just works pretty good at blocking all the heat. So I'll go ahead and get the rest taped up. Basically just gonna repeat that process. Forgot I was gonna have to trim around this lock. But anyway, just get it started along the edge and then push it down onto the insulation. Should be there. Just make sure that handle still works. I don't really want to get it gummed up to where it's inoperative. Now after you get the long sides done, you just do the same for the short sides. Once you get in the groove on these things too, like especially when I was doing the main body of it, it did take a while, but that was because I was assembling pieces and then taking them back off because I realized it would be a little bit easier to get some of the installation done. So I think I put that thing together and took it apart like 3 or 4 times. But as soon as you kind of get into a groove, it does go quite a bit quicker. This tape is also pretty flexible. You can kind of just, you know, if it gets a little bit bent up, just kind of shove it down and it has a tendency to flatten out. Same, if you get a little bit of bunches along the sides, try not to get a ton of them in there, but if you just press it down, it's pretty good at kind of self-healing itself. Kind of give you a look of what that looks like. So you got your before and after. Really not that bad. This one's a little bit extra complicated because it's got so many of these areas that you got to get insulated. The sides were way easier. It was just cutting one big insert. Anyway, I'll do the same to the other side of the door and I'll come back when I'm done and kind of show you what that looks like when it's all completed. All right, that's the second half of that door done. Just followed the same process as the other side. A little bit easier because I didn't have that notch that I had to cut out, but that's it. Unfortunately, I don't have a wide enough piece to do the whole front side of this door again. It would have been nice to do another whole panel on the front just to keep the front a little bit more insulated. But I think we'll be fine with what we have. Plus I'll have some spare in case I need to re-insulate anywhere or I want to use it anywhere else. I do think I'm going to go and tape up all of these exposed black areas just so they have some heat reflective property. So I'll go ahead and get that done, but then this thing will basically be finished up. I'll heat it up again and we'll see if that made a difference on the door, especially near the heating element, to see how hot that gets afterwards. All right, real quick, just wanted to show you what it looked like getting all those center rail areas taped up. I even did a little bit on the handle lock assembly thing. Not that I think that's gonna actually do anything, but I had some extra tape, so might as well throw it on there and try. All right, before I get this thing fired up again to check temperatures, I did also want to point out when this door is closed, it's got a little bit of play in it because there's not really a gasket on the door at all. There's not a ton of heat leak that I felt when I was testing it the other day, but I think just to get rid of some of that play in the door when it's closed, I have a smoker gasket somewhere that I ordered when I resealed my smoker, and I don't know where it's at, so I'm not going to do it now, but when I find it, I think I'm just going to add a strip along this ledge where the door closes up against to help take up some of that and maybe create a little bit more of a seal. But I wanted to point that out in case you do your own. You might want to get some that like 1/2 inch smoker seal gasket stuff and throw it on there. And if I get around to that before this video gets posted, I'll show that on here too so you can see what it looks like. All right, let's get this thing heated up again and see how that door does now after installation. Got to make sure I remember to check the handle too. All right, this thing's been running for like 2 minutes. It's already starting to get pretty warm. The thermometer in there is at like 175 degrees. Let me see if I can get that focused. So, you know, there are a lot of areas in there where we're getting up near 150 degrees. It's losing heat pretty fast since the door is open, but it is warming up. One thing I want to point out that's pretty interesting is this thing has hollow channels in every corner basically. And that's where it's really heating up now, especially up here. I'm gonna have to see if I can find a way to stuff some of that extra insulation up there and tape it, because this gets noticeably hot. Whereas this is pretty cool to the touch, even down by the heating element where it was getting warm before. And so let me show you where we're at. You know, like I was saying, we were up near 170 degrees in some areas inside. I think on average it was hitting at like 140. So that's the last temperature we measured, but let's get it again. We're only at 84 degrees on the outside of this thing. It might peak in some areas of it. And in that channel in the center that I taped, it's also noticeably a few degrees warmer. Let me try and get the side. So yeah, around 90 degrees. Maybe less if you get away from the edges. Let's see where that upper edge is. It's funny that it's not really reading any higher, but it's noticeably hotter to the touch on that edge compared to the door, which it says is 90 something degrees now. Interesting, because to the touch, it doesn't feel 90 degrees. This feels 90 degrees. Okay, it must be the distance. I can be an idiot sometimes. I was far away when I was testing it. I'm not sure if it's picking that up, but I mean, we're at 140 degrees on that top edge. And as soon as I drop it down to the door where there's insulation, we're at around 100 degrees. On the side where there's insulation, we're at 90 to 95, depending on where it ends up at, even lower in some spots where the insulation's better. So I think the insulation made a huge difference, especially on those voids in the door where it would get really hot before. I mean, this thing's been running longer than I let it run before, and you know, to the touch, it's really not too bad. The handle's not too bad. It made a huge difference around that too. You know, overall, I'm pretty impressed. It's cheap. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it's not that cheap. The locker was $100, but considering the other options that were on Amazon that I was cross-shopping, $100 was like the absolute cheapest you could get these things. And the build quality, if you were just going to use it as a locker, definitely reflects that. This thing is not sturdy by any means, but as soon as you start getting this thing modified for Cerakote oven use, add the insulation, add some of the tape, get everything tightened up real well, add the hardware, it really starts to feel a little bit more solid. Even, you know, the insulation helps with sound. It sounds like a solid cabinet now instead of a, you know, cheap sheet metal piece of garbage. So I'm impressed. It should give me plenty of space to do barreled actions with, you know, decent length barrels. I had my 300 Win Mag. Oh yeah, we're up to 475 degrees in there, and this thing is not that hot to the touch. All right, anyway, sorry for rambling. Let's get this thing unplugged. I had a 300 Win Mag Savage action. I posted it on the channel before. It's ways back. You can go take a look at it, but that had a 29-inch barrel on it. So between the 29-inch barrel and the length of the Savage long action, I'm not sure that thing would fit in here. I think it would have been close, but it's also, you know, a good thing that it would have been close. This should give me plenty of space for your typical short action with like a 26, 27-inch barrel. Might give me, you know, enough room for a little more than that, possibly. You know, you gotta take the heating element height out of it, and then those eyelets for the hardware drop down maybe 1.25 inches from the top, loosen some of that usable space. But overall, for my needs, you know, I'm not doing this as a business currently. Never know where that might go in the future. If Nimrod Collective continues to take off, I'm either going to start offering some of the parts Cerakoted, we'll see, or, you know, depending on what happens, if I can get an FFL set up and start doing customer work, Cerakote might be an option in the future. But for now, just for personal work, doing moly resin and getting into some Cerakote for my own personal guns, I think this will give me plenty of space to get what I need done. So just doing a quick measurement as this thing cools down. If I set this on top of the heating element and go to the bottom of that hardware, I have like 45.5 inches. So on second thought, that actually might be perfect for something like the Savage that I was talking about. 29, 30-inch barrel with the long action would probably put me close to that 40-41 inches, so we'll have to see what this thing looks like with a barreled action hanging in it. So that'll kind of give me an idea of the length that I might have to work with. As soon as I get all the PID stuff in, I think there's 1 or 2 parts I still need to order. I'll also try and throw up a total at the end of the video, along with all of the links in the description. That way you guys have an idea of what something like this takes to build. Just for frame of reference, I think the light armor stuff that would kind of be comparable to this. It's probably a bit nicer still, to be honest, but I think the starting price on a lot of those in their smaller ovens is easily in the thousands. And so project with this locker and these parts that I bought is obviously going to come in significantly cheaper than that. If I had to ballpark what's been spent so far on everything, I would probably say $350-ish. Not really comparable to my $20 thrift store oven that I was using for suppressors before, but for a decent step up from there with PID control and giving me enough space to do 1 or 2, barreled actions in here, I will gladly pay that. It's way cheaper than having some stuff sent out to have coated on its own anyway, and this gives me flexibility to do it at home. The only thing I'm probably going to have to upgrade in the future is sandblaster. I'm either just going to have to do it in free air instead of a cabinet, or we're going to have to work on upgrading that thing, because that's obviously not going to cut it for a 26-inch barrel, let alone a barreled action. So might not be playing with Cerakote on some of that stuff until I get a blasting solution figured out. I can probably get away with some moly resin, because they're a little bit more forgiving in the prep portion of everything. I should be able to get away with Scotch-Brite and scuffing the surface up and still getting a good finish with moly resin doing that. But again, like I said, we'll figure it out together as I do my first barrel action, and we'll kind of see how it goes from there. All right, it's the next day. I got all the PID controller components in. I'll show you those real quick. Just got the Inkbird PID controller there, fuse holder, a couple outlets, plug adapter for power cable in, temp probe, got the enclosure. It's all pretty basic. I am by no means an expert in this. I'm going to try and get this thing thrown together. I'm actually going to follow Redbeard Ops video. I'm not even going to pretend to be an expert on this, so this isn't really going to be a how-to. Just wanted to show you guys what I got, what the enclosure looks like. I'm going to go ahead and get this thing thrown together according to that video. All right, been spending like an hour on this thing. I've basically just gotten everything installed into the box. Basically the box is cut and all of the modules and stuff are inserted in there. I still got to work on the wiring, but figured I'd show you an update on it now. So there we got it. There's the plug where the smoker controller is going to come in. Fuse holder, that's the plug where the actual power is going to come in. Then we have the solid state relay that Inkbird included, the controller, and then an on-off switch. So pretty basic, and then it's just getting all that wired up, and that's basically it. I'll check in again as soon as I got all the wiring done. All right, day 3 working on this thing. I feel like garbage today. Huge change from yesterday, but whatever. No one cares about that. I got all the wiring done on the PID controller yesterday. Got a little frustrated with it, not gonna lie. Didn't realize that every single PID on the market has slightly different wiring. So the Redbeard Ops video is fantastic, especially if you go with the parts list in his video. But there are differences if you go with a different PID like I did. So at the end of the day, it's still a great guide. You just have to pay attention with where the wires are going on his setup compared to what your PID is wired for. Anyway, I did get it done. Like I said, I was frustrated with it, so I just ended up getting everything else mounted afterwards. I'll show you that now. Just got it mounted on top of the oven there. I did put a piece of insulation underneath it just to keep everything a little bit cooler in the box. I don't know how much of a difference it's going to make, but it did get pretty toasty on the top of the oven before. Also got the thermocouple wired in. There was just a pre-existing hole in the back that was a little bit easier to drill than some of the other locations on here, even though that was still kind of a pain in the ass. But either way, it works. As you can see. Now, really, it's just going to be all of the learning of trying to get this thing set up where it's supposed to go, get the PID tuned and dialed in. As of right now, the minimum is set to 60 degrees. This thing is rarely ever going to be that low, and it takes forever to get it up to 300 degrees, which is what you need for Cerakote and moly resin for most of the time. So I got to work on getting that minimum bumped up, get this thing where it's supposed to go, run it in a couple of times, and then see where it's at. Real quick initial test yesterday, I set it to 300. It ran up, it started holding at 300, and I checked the temp gauge that I have inside, and it was at like 350. So I think there's a little bit of tuning that it needs to be accurate, but that shouldn't be too bad. I know people say there's a learning curve with these, so we'll see how it goes. But as time goes on, if I have any difficulties with it or anything like that, I'll update the channel. But with that PID controller being done, this thing is just about finished. Don't really think there's anything left to do to the unit itself. I do have some door gasket coming in, I guess, that I'm going to throw on to take up some of that slack like I had mentioned before, but now it's really just getting it dialed in and using it. It is a mess where I'm planning on putting it over there next to the water heater, but that's going to be a whole day of project in and of itself, getting that cleaned up. I don't know how many times I've cleaned and reorganized this garage in the last 6 months, but it's at least 4 times. Anyway, just kind of wanted to give that little breakdown of the build, get it posted on YouTube. If you have any questions, throw them down in the comments. If you like this type of content, or, check out the rest of my channel, see what else is up there. If you like that type of content, subscribe. If there's anything else you'd like to see covered on this, just let me know. I mean, this is kind of new to me. Like I said before, I was using a toaster oven, so this is going to be quite the change. Looking forward to trying a couple of projects out with this. And as I do those and get experience with it, I'll probably post some of that type of content as well. But yeah, thank you for watching. Best of luck to you if you decide to take on anything like this. I think it's worth it. And like I said, if you have any questions, throw them in the comments. Thank you.